Hello everyone, welcome to the wood shop. Before we do any work, we need to make sure that we are safe. Always wear safety glasses, hearing protection if necessary, remove jewelry, tie back long hair, tuck in loose clothing, and always wear closed-toed shoes. Welcome back. Today we're talking about the jointer. The jointer is used to create a flat reference face and a 90-degree reference edge on a piece of wood. The piece of wood may have a bow or a twist or a cup in it. It may be bent or slightly crooked in some way. It also usually will show up from the mill rough, like this. This is rough on both sides. It has one fairly decent edge, but it's actually got quite a bit of a bow in it this way. So what the jointer will do is resurface this board and make it flat for us so that we can then take it to the planer. All right, so let's take a look at that, how this machine is actually functioning. Here is the outfeed table, and this is the infeed table. I'm using this piece of wood here to demonstrate how much material might get removed if we were to run this board through the jointer. So it moves in this direction from infeed to outfeed, and the outfeed table is exactly the same height as the knives at the apex. So this is the cutter head, and it spins around really fast and removes the material, and the outfeed table supports the material at the exact same height as the blade is removing material on the outside. So as this runs through, it's being supported, and it can run perfectly parallel to the infeed table, but slightly higher by the thickness of material that we're removing. Okay, so that's demonstrated here. First, I would like to talk about a few safety points about the jointer. Always wear your safety glasses, wear hearing protection because the jointer is quite loud, and be aware of the size of board you're jointing as well. 12 inches is the minimum length of a piece of wood. So anything shorter than 12 inches tends to dive into the cutter head, causing an unsafe situation. It doesn't have enough contact on either the infeed or the outfeed table to be safe. 12 inches is the minimum length. That also goes for the planer. You'll see that in that video. We always joint with the grain. So the grain on this board goes in this direction, so we're jointing with the grain. We wouldn't want to joint against the grain, so cross grain. We also can't joint end grain. End grain does not react well to the jointer or the planer because as the knives go to remove this material, it's basically going to break chunks away, and those can become projectiles. This can get lodged into the cutter head, and it's just unsafe all around. Don't do it. The other problem is most boards along their end grain are not 12 inches wide, so they wouldn't be able to fit through here anyway. Okay? Always use a push stick if the piece of wood is below the level of the fence. This one is. Here's the fence. This piece of wood is lower than the level of the fence, so you can use a push stick. I prefer to use a push stick that is narrower than my board, so you could use this and the paddle to run this through. The same goes for jointing an edge. We would want to reduce the amount of cutter exposed. This is too much cutter exposed, so we would move the fence over for this piece. So we'd have less cutter exposed, and we would run our board flat up against the fence. This hasn't been jointed, so I think that's pretty clear by this big bow in the piece of wood here. So we would always want to joint the face first. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Adjust the fence. So you may not be able to see it, but it removed only the material at the two ends where this bow contacted the blades. So we need to run it 2 times. Okay, so all of this area here has not been touched by the jointer yet. This is flat in this section here, so we need a few more passes to get it flat. So now this board is flat. It has been referenced. I would call this a reference face. And I know that I'm going to joint this edge. So I like to mark my reference face with a little loop like that. And then once I joint this edge, I will identify that those two go together, that they are 90 degrees, and that they're both reference surfaces. So never assume that the fence is actually square to the table. You actually want to check it. Make sure the square is contacting the infeed table and the fence, and you shouldn't see any light between here. It should be nice and square. This one looks pretty good. So we're going to joint the edge to match our face. So we want the face, which we've already clearly marked, that goes against the fence, so that we know our reference face is against the fence, and that our reference edge that we're creating will actually be 90 degrees to that. If it were on the outside, we would have no control over where this reference face is in relation to the reference edge we're trying to create, because we would be using an unfinished surface. So, reduce the cutter and joint. Keeping it flat against the fence at all times. Nice smooth pass. If you're unsure if it's touched the whole surface, you can put some pencil lines on there. And if they're all gone, you know the whole surface has been referenced. All right. That looks nice. So I will mark it, showing that my reference face and my reference edge go together, and they're 90 degrees. Like so. Now this would be ready for the planer to make the final surface, or the final face, parallel to the reference face, and then table saw to remove the final edge. But I just wanted to talk a few more safety points. If you are jointing a board that is taller than the fence, you may not actually need a push stick. You can run it through this way, but you don't want your hands to directly go over the cutter head. So tuck in your fingers and go around, okay? So put your thumb over top, run through, and bring this hand around, and then it should pick up on the other side, and this one here, okay? So your hands never pass directly over the cutter head. If you feel like you don't have that much control, you can, once again, use a guard or a push stick in both hands, and you're safe. You don't need to move around because you have something between your hands and the cutter head. Okay? Sometimes we may choose to joint really nasty looking boards that other people might not choose to use, but maybe we want to use them because they have a lot of character. But before we use any boards like that, we always want to make sure they're safe to put through the jointer. So check and make sure there's no loose knots or any rocks or nails or big chunks of glue on these rougher boards, because these things can damage the cutter head or they can become projectiles and cause injury to you or somebody else in the shop. So always check over your board before you run it through the jointer, because it can do damage to the machine or damage to people. Very important. That is all for the jointer video. We'll see you next time.